In this video, we're going to compare the iPad mini to the iPad Pro 12.9 inch. And yes, that's going to be the largest iPad versus the smallest iPad. So let's jump into it. So let's talk about why I purchased each of these iPads. The iPad Pro 12.9 inch I purchased for taking notes and for schoolwork. And that was the main reason why I initially bought the iPad. Now, I also used it to do some creative work. I love taking photos and I love editing them. And I also like just testing out all the different applications on the iPad because using the Apple Pencil makes editing photos and videos a lot more fun than it is on a traditional computer like I have back there. Now for the mini, I basically just wanted to use it as a tablet, not necessarily for power usage, and didn't really want to use it for the creative work, but just content consumption, browsing the web, stuff like that. Now, when it comes to comparing these two devices, let's talk about what I noticed first. And this is probably what you're going to notice first. And essentially, the first thing was the size. Obviously, they're drastically different. They're polar opposites when it comes to size. One is the biggest iPad that Apple offers, and one's the smallest iPad that Apple offers. So obviously, the size is going to be a huge difference. Now, when it comes to the next noticeable thing, it's going to be the weight. Obviously, because you have a bigger device, you're going to have a much heavier device. And especially when you pair it up with a Magic Keyboard, all of a sudden becomes extremely heavy compared to the very light and portable iPad mini. Now this next one has had a whole bunch of controversy in the tech community and maybe for a lot of consumers, just regular consumers as well. And this is with the screen refresh rate. So the iPad Pros have the ProMotion 120 Hz display, whereas the iPad mini only has 60 Hz. And also because it has 60 Hz, there is this jello effect that people have been reporting on. And I can say that I did notice it. Now it didn't interfere with my usage too much, and it didn't bother me after the first few hours, like the first 2 days that I used it. Now, obviously, sometimes I did notice it, and overall, it just didn't bother me that much. Like, it doesn't interfere with what you're doing. You might notice it when you're scrolling, when the iPad's in a vertical stance, and you're just scrolling down a web page. You might notice it here and there, but when you're using it on a day-to-day basis, when you're browsing through YouTube videos, when you're watching YouTube videos, when you're surfing the web and just doing things, as long as you're not looking for it, you're not really going to notice it. Now, everyone's eyes are different, so you might pick up on it more than I did. And I would highly recommend you going to the store and actually just seeing this in person before you make the purchase, because if you get it and it really annoys you, it'll be a very frustrating purchase for you essentially. So go ahead and check it out in the store and just make sure that your eyes aren't too sensitive to it. Also, it's important to note that Apple actually said that this is normal for this type of display. So that is also something to keep in mind. Overall, I would have to say it's not that bad of an issue. You just have to test it out in person. And I highly stress that, and I've said that about 3 times now, because everyone's eyes is different and what you see may not be the same as what I see. Now, after using the iPad mini for about 2 weeks, I essentially noticed quite a few things as far as how I integrated it into my day-to-day life. Traditionally, I would use my iPad Pro 12.9 inch downstairs. I would always take it down with the Magic Keyboard, and I would use it for my content consumption as I sat down on the couch. And it kind of served as a laptop replacement as well, because I wouldn't want to take my laptop that I've hooked up here to the monitor behind me. And essentially, I just did things that weren't too intensive. I did edit some thumbnails, did edit some photos on there, but aside from that, nothing too intensive. That being said, it's fantastic when it comes to these creative apps. The screen real estate is really nice, and it just gives you a whole bunch of space to work with, and it makes it very easy to edit those photos, especially when you use the Apple Pencil and you're masking things in and out, or when you're just trying to make those fine adjustments that maybe a smaller screen won't be suitable for. Now, obviously, I did mention that I kind of use this as a laptop replacement, and something that will be an important factor for using your iPad like that is productivity and multitasking. Obviously, because you have such a large screen on the iPad Pro, you can have the side-by-side apps open, and they work really well. You can see things clearly. You can see everything at a decent distance away, so you don't have to bring it closer to your face, kind of like your smartphone. Also, the space that the app has is very usable. It's not like you have 2 half iPhone apps kind of open up side by side, and that's what the iPad mini felt like. Now, when I got the mini, what changed with my integration of the iPad into my day-to-day life was I replaced the iPad mini with my iPad Pro in a lot of scenarios. So when I wanted to read articles online or in the news articles, I would just pull out the iPad mini. It was just a lot lighter. It was a little bit easier to read on. It just felt more natural, kind of like a book. Now, I also started watching videos on it, and that became my content consumption device. It was just a lot lighter to use, and it was more comfortable to use on the couch or like at the dining room table while I was eating. It just made things a little bit easier, and it felt less in the way, and kind of less of a burden when I was holding it. The iPad Pro 12.9-inch can get very heavy, especially after watching like a 30-minute video or like Ted Lasso, like an episode like that. It gets very heavy, and it kind of makes it feel a little bit too clunky, if you know what I mean. Now I also started taking my FaceTime calls on the iPad mini. Obviously, the center stage camera is something that will be a little bit useful. The camera I felt like wasn't the best quality, but I'm not complaining too much because at the end of the day, I can see the other person and they can see me perfectly fine. But I guess you can't complain too much about the quality because at the same time, it's a whole lot cheaper than the iPhones are. Now, one other thing that I like to do on the couch while I'm watching TV is just browse the web and either read news articles, like I said, or just shop on Amazon. And essentially, I found myself replacing the iPad Pro with my iPad mini. And I also used to do that on my iPhone a bit, but the iPad mini lets you do the full desktop browsing, and the screen real estate on there is big enough to take advantage of that desktop browsing experience. And essentially you don't feel like it's crammed on the screen like you might on an iPhone. And you also get those iPad apps, which really improves your user experience when it comes to shopping in different applications, or just using those applications. Like specifically, let's talk about a few. Like checking emails is a lot nicer on the iPad because the iPad app lets you have the column on the left-hand side, and you can view the email. And if you want to view the entire email, it pretty much all is there on the bigger screen as opposed to the iPhones. Now, content consumption is also something that's super nice on this screen compared to an iPhone, and that's something that the screen real estate is really good for. And obviously it is going to be a lot smaller than the actual 12.9-inch iPad Pro, but because it is still a decent size bigger than a phone, it doesn't feel too small. And everyone has their own quirks and preferences, so at least for me, I didn't really find that a problem, and I found it more enjoyable of an experience because it does have stereo speakers, and I had no issues with the speakers. The Touch ID worked great. And I have to say that when it comes to comparing like Face ID versus Touch ID, when you're out and about with masks, Face ID sucks. When you're basically at home and you're using it, I found that Face ID is something that I missed. Now, when you just look at your iPad and you just unlock it, that just makes the experience so much quicker. And Touch ID, you have to rest it on the iPad for a little bit before it unlocks. But overall, it's still not like a deal breaker for me by any means. And I know there's some people that have had some issues with it, and I think that there are some defective units out there at the same time. Your mileage may vary, and you just have to wait and see how it is for you. Now, before we wrap up this video, I just wanted to take a quick second to let you know that if you're interested in knowing specifically about note-taking on the iPad mini and how it relates to students, then make sure you check out that video. I made that video already. You can check it out on the channel. I'll leave a link up here. And if this video was of any use to you and benefited you in any way, make sure to let me know down in the comments below how it helped you or what your thoughts are on this comparison. And also, if this helped you in any way, please make sure you like and subscribe. It does help out the channel a ton, more than you might think. And it really helps me basically know that you're enjoying this video and what videos to make for you. And also, it can help me unlock the next level of creativity with this channel, because as the channel grows, I'll be able to do more think out of the box type of ideas for this channel, which will in turn help you get some more awesome content out there. So until next time, don't forget to take it easy with some tea.